Hey everyone, welcome to Blooming Change. This is rebloom.news' weekly interview series where we interview people who we believe are making a positive impact in the world of sustainability. Just as a reminder, rebloom.news is a weekly newsletter that offers advice, inspiration, and actual items to live more consciously with the planet, and you can subscribe below. So today we're talking with Eugenia all about veganism. So she's based in Hong Kong and is an activist for food that doesn't harm the planet. She runs a great podcast called The Everyday Activist and also runs a very informative Instagram that I will link below here. So Eugenia, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me on this newsletter and interview. It's great to be here. As you mentioned, I'm 19 years old. I'm based in Hong Kong, and a lot of what the work I do revolves around, I guess, creating educational content for people on Instagram and also my blog, and recently a podcast that I started. So my Instagram account originally began as a vegan guide to Hong Kong as a way to sort of dispel the myth that it's difficult to be vegan in Hong Kong, and I wanted to prove to people that it's something that is more accessible than we think, and it is something people can do in order to reduce their environmental impact. But as I learned more about the impact of food and how it contributes to our individual carbon footprints and like the environment on like a larger scale, I'm realizing that it's a lot more than being vegan, and there are actually so many different elements to it. So I'm trying to use this space to document things I'm learning and also sharing this with different people. And with the podcast, what I do is I interview different activists from around the world about the different ways that they are showing up for people and the planet and its people as well. And I'm trying to demonstrate to people that there's no one size fits all approach to activism, and it doesn't necessarily have to be showing up by being on the streets, and there are many ways to do it as well.
Your Instagram is super inspiring. That's how I found you originally. I love all the content you share, and your content creation is great. So I definitely want people to check that out and support you in your activism through your content creation and everything there. So let's dive in a little bit. So I think your story is so interesting with being vegan in Hong Kong, because I've read a lot about how in Asian cultures, meat is such a big cultural identity. So I'd love to dive into, your thoughts and your living through this type of transition. So just to start out for people watching this, like what inspired you to become a vegan as well as an activist and tie it to activism?
Yeah, so the original thing for me was, I think like many other vegans, I watched a ton of those documentaries. So there was like Cowspiracy, Earthlings, I think, what was it called? Forks Over Knives, those ones. And I think seeing it visually, the impact of animal agriculture on the animals, I think it was like an instant change for me. And I didn't want to contribute to that industry almost immediately. I had no appeal for meat right after watching those documentaries. But gradually, I sort of learned the impacts of the environment as well, and how there's so many reasons to go vegan, or at least to go plant-based and reduce our meat consumption. Yeah, so the reason why I choose to use veganism or like our diets as a form of activism, or that angle specifically to communicate my message, is because food is like it's an integral part of everyone's lives. It's a part of people's culture. It's a part of like everyone. Everyone eats, or at least like eat three times a day, and so that gives people the opportunity to make informed choices about the types of systems that they want to support by simply by just choosing what meals they want to have. And of course, that's not going to be the thing that changes the whole system or changes how how like everyone eats, but I think it's a really important first step to start conversations, as well as inspire other people to do the same, and hopefully catalyze into something that's more impactful.
Definitely. Food is such a great topic because everyone needs it. Everyone eats it every day. So yeah, I definitely can see the connection there. And then living in Hong Kong, what has been the biggest challenge you've encountered about practicing veganism?
I think the biggest thing is definitely the cultural aspect of eating meat, because a lot of what we eat at home and also with our family during larger family gatherings is dim sum. And so that includes like barbecue pork buns, and all
Mhm.
these fried rices that also involve so many different types of meat, and egg as well. And so I feel like a bit of a burden sometimes when I'm attending these family gatherings, especially when I have to order something separate for myself. Um, and it's like another family member who's paying the bill or something. And so, yeah, I just feel like an inconvenience sometimes in that sense. And also, I feel like it's still not really understood among older relatives as to why people our age or like people of this generation decide to go vegan or decide to cut out meat, just because I think it's for them, they view meat as they view it as like a huge privilege to be able to eat meat. And so us not wanting it is it's like very questionable. um, I guess can almost be disrespectful in some ways. And so I think navigating that is something that's been a bit challenging. I think having conversations is a really important aspect of being able to, um, yeah, develop this mutual understanding as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the mutual understanding is really important because, yeah, a lot of older generations probably won't necessarily understand the reasoning. They also don't really, necessarily believe in the climate crisis and its, entirety. So I feel like a lot of the time you have to have that educational portion where you say, even if you don't understand it, you can respect my, wishes of living this way. So definitely, totally get that. So for people watching here, what we're really talking about is this, start to veganism. I have a lot of friends that do like a meatless Monday or, just try to cut out meat in a lot of their meals, but they're not totally vegan. So what advice would you give to people who want to start transitioning to a more vegan lifestyle or just eat less meat in general? What would be your top tips for that?
Yeah. So something that I always try to remind people is that veganism, or at least how I see it, veganism is a black or white, um, not a black or white thing, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I think the common stereotype of veganism is that, oh, if you accidentally have like a bit of dairy, or if you accidentally have something that touches meat, then you're like disqualified from being vegan. And I feel like that's that's such a harmful way of labeling people, or a harmful way of going about it, because not only does that prevent people from wanting to go vegan in the first place, but it just creates this very unattainable ideal that people are afraid to like attempt to go for. And so I've had friends who have said things like, "Oh, I would go vegan, but I just don't want to be labeled as vegan." So it's like, um, I think it's important to acknowledge that everyone can take things at their own pace, and being vegan or going plant based is going to look different for everyone. A comparison or like a model that I like to follow is this personality framework thing developed by this happiness researcher called Gretchen Rubin, where she talks about how they're two ends of the spectrum. They're abstainers, but they're also moderators. And a lot of people think that veganism has to be at the abstainer end of the spectrum, meaning it has to be all or nothing. You can't ever have meat if you start going vegan. Um, but I think some people, what works better for them is if they go through like the moderator route, meaning maybe you could do I guess the opposite of meatless Monday would be like a meat Friday or something, um, and just giving yourself a chance to like have a bit of something that you crave as a way of keeping the momentum of being able to continue eating vegan for the rest of your life. Does
Gotcha.
that make
So overall, choose plant based, and then maybe only eat meat on like Friday. So it's something that can keep you going, that you like sort of look forward to. But I feel like as you would transition to plant based, you probably wouldn't crave meat
Yeah,
as much, but it would probably help with the transition for sure.
yeah. And so it like helps you phase it out, um, like gradually. So it doesn't have to be an instant process, and it doesn't have to be overnight, which I think is also like a misconception. But for a lot of people, it is, just because once you see those documentaries, it can be.
Yeah, you don't want to eat it anymore. Well, so I want to talk a little bit about your podcast and how in the beginning you were talking about how you have this emphasis on there's no one size fits all approach to activism. So what was there a particular moment when you really realized that? And can you sort of dive into your thought process around that?
Mhm. I wouldn't say there's a particular moment, but I think it's similar to the whole thing about veganism in that I really want these forms of activism to be inclusive, and I want people to feel like they can be a part of it without having to do things a certain way. Um, and so the premise behind the Everyday Activist podcast is that I think a lot of people, when they think of the term activists, they immediately come up with images of people protesting on the streets, doing like the conventional types of activism. But first of all, like there are people who might be disabled, for example, who might not be able to go on the streets as their like dominant form of activism, or in some countries it might not even be legal to go on the streets. So I think it's really important to acknowledge the work that other people are doing as well, whether it be educating other people about these issues, because I think that's a huge thing, or writing emails to their government, or even starting up like grassroots organizations to raise awareness or do other activities. I think there's so many ways to be an activist, and I really want to shed light on these different methods that people are doing um, to bring about awareness about the environment and also to create change.
Definitely. Well, I love that. And I definitely want to encourage people to go check out your podcast. I'll link it below so people can click in and make it easy to access. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today. I really can't wait to share you on the rebloom platform, and hopefully you're going to inspire some people to take out some meat in their lifestyle, or, find different ways to become an activist. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Bye.